I'm Alex, 28, a tech developer from Seattle who spent years supporting my brother Jake's academic journey. At his college graduation, I overheard my mother Victoria saying, "Alex will never amount to anything, not like Jake." 3 years later, my assistant walked into my office and said, "CEO, your mother is on line 1. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Growing up in the Mitchell family meant understanding your place in the hierarchy. For me, that place was always below my younger brother Jake. My parents, Victoria and Richard Mitchell, owned a successful software company in Seattle, and from the moment Jake showed aptitude for coding at age 12, it was clear he was being groomed to take over the family business. I, on the other hand, was expected to take a supporting role, maybe in HR or marketing, something more suited to your abilities, as my mother often said. Our modern 5-bedroom house in Queen Anne was filled with expectations and subtle reminders of my secondary status. My father's home office was off-limits unless summoned, and my mother's constant criticism of everything from my career choices to my appearance was the soundtrack of my childhood. Even my bedroom felt temporary, decorated in my mother's preferred minimalist style rather than reflecting any of my interests. I excelled academically, earning straight A's and participating in every extracurricular activity I could find. I taught myself to code by watching YouTube tutorials at night, building small applications that I never showed my parents. When I was accepted to the University of Washington for computer science, I thought maybe, finally, they would see my potential. They didn't. Instead, they focused on preparing Jake for his college applications, though he was 2 years behind me. "University of Washington is fine, I suppose," my mother said when I showed her my acceptance letter. "Though I'd hoped you might consider something in business administration instead. Tech isn't really your strong suit, is it, sweetie?" My father was even more direct. "Computer science is tough, Alex. Don't be disappointed if you need to switch majors. There's no shame in finding your level." Despite their doubts, I thrived in my program. I worked part-time at the university's IT department, took extra courses during summer breaks, and graduated with honors. When I told my parents I wanted to join a startup instead of working at Mitchell Software, my mother laughed. "A startup? Those things fail all the time. We've already discussed your position in our marketing department. It's perfect for you. You'll have structure, stability." "I want to build things," I said. "I'm good at it." "Oh, Alex," my mother sighed, exchanging a look with my father. "Let's be realistic about your skills. Jake is the builder in the family." Jake, to his credit, seemed uncomfortable with these comparisons. "Alex is really good, Mom. You should see some of her projects." But my mother waved him off. "Don't encourage her fantasies, Jake. She needs to be practical." I took the startup job anyway, a small company called Technova, developing accessibility software. My starting salary was barely enough to cover rent for my tiny studio apartment in Capitol Hill, but it was mine. I was writing code that mattered, making applications more accessible for users with disabilities. The first year was brutal. 18-hour days, instant ramen for dinner more often than not, and the constant voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my mother, "You're going to fail." But I didn't. Our first product launch was successful enough to attract attention from angel investors, and I was promoted to lead developer. Meanwhile, Jake was following the prescribed path at the University of Washington. My parents paid for his apartment near campus, covered all his expenses, and frequently bragged about his academic achievements. When he was struggling with a difficult programming class, my mother hired a private tutor without hesitation. When I had faced similar challenges, I was told to figure it out or find another major. I didn't resent Jake. He was kind, brilliant, and never intentionally played into our parents' favoritism. We met for coffee every few weeks, and he always asked about my work, genuinely interested in what I was building. "Mom and Dad don't get it," he told me during one of our coffee dates. "They think software development is still like it was when they started their company. They don't understand the innovation happening at places like Technova." I appreciated his support, but it didn't ease the sting when my parents dismissed my accomplishments. When Technova secured a major round of funding, and I was named in several tech publications as one to watch. My mother's response was, "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Jake made the dean's list again?" As Jake's graduation approached, my role at Technova expanded. Our CEO, Nadia Patel, had become something of a mentor to me, recognizing my technical skills and pushing me to develop my leadership abilities. "You have a unique perspective, Alex," she told me. "You understand both the code and the people who use it." That's rare and valuable. The day before Jake's graduation, I had a meeting with Nadia that ran late. She wanted to discuss my future at the company. "We're restructuring," she said, sliding a document across the table. "I'm moving to the board, and we need a new CEO. Someone who understands our mission, our technology, and our culture." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stared at the document, my name listed as the proposed new Chief Executive Officer. Me? But I'm a developer. I'm not. "You're exactly what we need," Nadia interrupted. "You've been doing half the job already." "The board agrees. Think about it overnight, but I need your answer tomorrow." I left the office in a daze, the offer letter tucked in my bag. CEO of Technova at 28. It was beyond anything I had imagined for myself, certainly beyond anything my parents had imagined for me. I decided to wait until after Jake's graduation to tell them. This was his moment, and despite everything, I didn't want to overshadow it. Jake's graduation ceremony was held in the university's main auditorium on a perfect Seattle spring day, the rare kind where the sun breaks through the clouds and makes the whole city gleam. I arrived early, finding my parents already seated in the reserved section for families. "Alex, you're here," my mother said, sounding surprised. "I thought you might be too busy with your little tech job." "I wouldn't miss Jake's graduation, Mom," I replied, taking a seat beside her. "Technova is doing well, by the way. We just secured another round of funding." "That's nice," she said, already distracted by waving to the parents of one of Jake's friends. "Did you hear Jake already has a job lined up? Mitchell Software, of course, but he's starting as a senior developer. Your father created a special position for him." The ceremony was long, but I felt a genuine surge of pride when Jake walked across the stage, accepting his diploma with a broad smile. He had worked hard, despite the safety net our parents provided, and he deserved this moment of recognition. After the ceremony, we gathered at an upscale restaurant downtown for a celebration lunch. Jake was surrounded by friends and extended family, accepting congratulations with the easy charm he'd always possessed. I hung back, nursing a glass of champagne and checking my phone occasionally. Nadia had texted, "Thought about my offer?" I was typing a response when I overheard my mother speaking to my Aunt Beth at the next table. They didn't notice me standing nearby, partially hidden by a decorative plant. "Jake is going to do so well at the company," my mother was saying. "Richard is already talking about a 5-year plan to groom him for leadership." "What about Alex?" my aunt asked. "She seems to be doing well with her tech work." My mother laughed, a dismissive sound that made my stomach clench. "Oh, Alex is just playing at being a developer. You know how she is, always trying to prove something. That little startup will probably fold within a year, and then maybe she'll finally accept that position in our marketing department. She'll never amount to anything in tech, not like Jake. She doesn't have what it takes." The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd accomplished, the late nights, the successful product launches, the recognition from industry peers, my mother still saw me as incapable. Inadequate. A disappointment. "Actually," Jake's voice cut through my thoughts, "Alex's company just raised millions in their latest funding round. She was named one of Seattle's quote, 30 under 30 feet in tech last month." He had approached without either of them noticing, and had clearly heard our mother's comments. My aunt looked embarrassed, but my mother just waved her hand dismissively. "Those lists are meaningless, Jake, and startups raise money all the time before they collapse. I'm just being realistic about Alex's prospects." Jake frowned, Mom, that's not fair. Alex is incredibly talented. Let's not discuss this now, my mother said firmly. This is your day, and I don't want it spoiled with talk about your sister's temporary job. I slipped away before they noticed me, retreating to the restroom where I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The familiar weight of my mother's disapproval settled on my shoulders, but something was different this time. Instead of the usual hurt, I felt anger, clear and sharp. My phone buzzed with another text from Nadia. No pressure, but the board is waiting on your decision. We believe in you, Alex. Someone believed in me. Someone who had seen my work, my dedication, my vision. Someone who wasn't blinded by family dynamics or outdated expectations. I texted back, I'm in. Let's talk details tomorrow. When I returned to the table, Jake caught my eye and mouthed, Sorry? I shook my head slightly, letting him know it wasn't his fault. My father was regaling the table with stories of Jake's childhood technological prowess, while my mother beamed proudly. A toast? My father announced, raising his glass. To Jake, the future of Mitchell Software. Everyone raised their glasses. I did too, genuinely happy for my brother despite everything else. As the meal continued, I remained quiet, processing my decision and what it would mean for my future. My mother mistook my silence for sullenness. Alex, do try to be more enthusiastic about your brother's success, she whispered when we were momentarily alone. Just because your career hasn't taken off doesn't mean you should be jealous of Jake. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something important. Her opinion of me wasn't going to change, no matter what I achieved, and more importantly, it didn't need to. I'm not jealous, Mom, I said calmly. I'm proud of Jake. I'm also proud of myself. She seemed surprised by my response, but quickly recovered. Well, of course, dear, your little job is nice. Perhaps not what we expected for you, but nice. I could have told her then about the CEO position, but I knew it wouldn't make a difference. Instead, I simply smiled and rejoined the celebration, a new sense of determination building inside me. The next day, I met with Nadia and the board to finalize my new position as CEO of Teknova. The transition would take place over 3 months, with a formal announcement to the company and press release scheduled for the following week. As I signed the contract, I felt a mixture of excitement and terror. Could I really do this? Lead an entire company? The doubts that my mother had planted over the years threatened to surface, but I pushed them down. You've earned this, Alex, Nadia said, as if reading my thoughts. You're ready. I threw myself into learning everything I could about being a CEO. I read books on leadership, took online courses in business strategy, and shadowed Nadia in every meeting. The formal announcement went out, and my inbox was flooded with congratulatory messages from colleagues, industry contacts, and old classmates. Jake was one of the first to call. CEO? Alex, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. Thanks, I said, his genuine enthusiasm warming me. It's a little terrifying, to be honest. You're going to be amazing, he assured me. Have you told Mom and Dad yet? I hadn't. Part of me wanted to prove myself in the role before facing their inevitable skepticism. Another part, the wounded child who still sought their approval, was afraid of their reaction. Not yet, I admitted. I'm waiting for the right time. Jake was silent for a moment. They should know, Alex. They should see what you've accomplished. He was right, but I wasn't ready. I'll tell them soon, I promised. The transition period was intense. I worked longer hours than ever, absorbing everything I could from Nadia while still fulfilling my technical responsibilities. We hired 2 new developers to eventually take over my coding duties, but I insisted on staying involved in the technical aspects of our products. It was my foundation, the skill set that had brought me this far. 3 months flew by, and suddenly it was my first official day as CEO of Teknova. I arrived early, before most of the staff, and stood in my new office, looking out at the Seattle skyline. The Space Needles stood tall against the morning sky, a reminder of the city's blend of innovation and resilience. I felt a surge of pride, not just in my new position, but in the journey that had brought me here. My assistant, Priya, knocked on the open door. "Your 9 a.m. is here early," she said, "and your mother is on line 1. I froze. "My mother?" Priya nodded. "She said it's important. Should I tell her you're in a meeting?" My first instinct was to avoid the call, to delay the inevitable criticism, but I was the CEO now. I faced bigger challenges than my mother's disapproval every day. "I'll take it," I said, sitting behind my desk. "And please show my 9 a.m. in 5 minutes. Priya nodded and closed the door behind her. I took a deep breath and picked up the phone. "Hello, Mom." "Alexandra," my mother's voice was tight. "I just saw the most peculiar thing online. Some technology publication is claiming you've been named CEO of that startup you work for. There must be some mistake." Of course, she assumed it was a mistake. "It's not a mistake, Mom. I was appointed CEO 3 months ago. Today is my first official day in the position." Silence. Then, "But you're not. I mean, you don't have the experience for something like that." "Actually, I do," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "I've been with Technova since the beginning. I've led product development, managed teams, and helped secure our funding rounds. The board and our founder believe I'm the right person to lead the company forward." Another silence, longer this time. "I see." She didn't sound convinced. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order, though I do wonder about the wisdom of taking on such responsibility at your age." It was exactly the response I had expected, yet it still stung. "Thank you for the congratulations, Mom. I need to go now. I have meetings all day." "Of course," she said, her tone suggesting she didn't quite believe me. "Perhaps you could come to dinner this weekend? Your father and I would like to discuss this." Development. The thought of sitting through a dinner while they picked apart my qualifications made my stomach turn. "I'll check my schedule and let you know," I said noncommittally. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up before she could respond and took a moment to collect myself. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd anticipated, yet I felt oddly calm. My mother's doubt no longer had the power to devastate me. It was just one opinion, and not even an informed one at that. Priya knocked again and opened the door. "CEO, your 9 a.m. is ready. CEO." The title still felt strange, but hearing it from someone else made it real in a way it hadn't been before. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and nodded. "Send them in." My first day as CEO was a whirlwind of meetings, decisions, and unexpected challenges. A key client was considering moving to a competitor. Our lead developer was being headhunted by Google. The office lease was up for renewal with a significant rent increase proposed. Each issue required my attention, my decision, my leadership. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but exhilarated. I had navigated each challenge successfully, making decisions that felt right not just for the company's bottom line, but for our mission and our people. As I gathered my things to leave, Priya appeared in my doorway. "Your brother called twice," she said. "He says congratulations, and he's taking you to dinner to celebrate. He's waiting in the lobby." Jake was pacing the reception area, a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a small gift bag in the other. When he saw me, his face broke into a wide smile. "CEO Mitchell," he said, handing me the flowers. "Congratulations." I accepted the flowers, unexpectedly touched by the gesture. "Thanks, Jake. You didn't have to come all this way." "Are you kidding? My sister's first day as CEO? Of course I had to come." He handed me the gift bag. "Open it." Inside was a small, elegant nameplate for my desk. It read simply, "Alexandra Mitchell, CEO." "I thought you might need a reminder sometimes," he said, "for those days when imposter syndrome hits." I ran my fingers over the engraved letters. "Thank you. It's perfect." Over dinner at my favorite restaurant, Jake listened as I recounted the day's challenges and triumphs. Unlike our parents, he asked insightful questions and offered genuine support. "Mom called me," he said eventually, as we were finishing dessert. "She seemed confused about your new position. I laughed. Confused is one way to put it. She thinks it's a mistake. Jake shook his head. She doesn't understand the industry, Alex. Neither of them do. Their company is stuck in the past, resistant to change. That's why I've decided not to join them after all. This was news to me. What? But at your graduation, they were talking about a 5-year plan for you to take over. Their plan, not mine, Jake said firmly. I've accepted a position with a cybersecurity firm. I start next month. I stared at him in surprise. Does Mom know? Not yet, he admitted. I'm telling them tomorrow. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You've inspired me, Alex. Watching you forge your own path, despite their doubts and disapproval. I want that kind of courage. His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. All these years, I had thought Jake was oblivious to our parents' differential treatment, or at least unbothered by it. I had never considered that he might be watching me, learning from my struggles. It's not easy, I warned him, standing up to them. I know, he said, but it's necessary. For both of us. When I returned to my apartment that night, I placed the nameplate on my desk where I would see it every morning. Alexandra Mitchell, CEO. It wasn't just a title. It was proof that I had been right to believe in myself, even when no one else did. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as I settled into my new role. I implemented changes I had been considering for months. A more flexible remote work policy, additional resources for our accessibility testing team, a partnership with a local college to create internships for students from underrepresented groups in tech. Each decision was met with support from our team and positive results for the company. Our client retention improved, employee satisfaction scores rose, and we began attracting talent from larger tech companies who were drawn to our innovative culture and mission-driven approach. The industry took notice. We were featured in several tech publications, and I was invited to speak at conferences about accessibility in software design. Each public appearance strengthened my confidence, though I still battled occasional doubts, especially late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts, and my mother's voice echoed in my head, "You'll never amount to anything." 1 month into my role as CEO, my parents finally requested a formal dinner to discuss my new position. The invitation came via text from my father, uncharacteristically formal. Your mother and I would like to have dinner with you this Friday to discuss your career development. 7 p.m. at Cascade. Cascade was their favorite restaurant, expensive and traditional, with a dress code and a wine list longer than most novels. I spent more time than I care to admit deciding what to wear. The navy blue power suit that made me feel confident? The designer dress I'd splurged on with my signing bonus? In the end, I chose the dress. Not to impress them, I told myself, but because I wanted to look and feel my best for what I knew would be a challenging evening. Cascade was busy when I arrived, the quiet murmur of expensive conversations filling the dimly lit space. My parents were already seated at their usual table by the window, my father in his standard charcoal suit, my mother wearing pearls and disapproval in equal measure. Alexandra, my mother said as I approached, her eyes scanning my appearance. You're looking well. That dress is quite nice. From my mother, this qualified as effusive praise. I accepted it with a nod and took my seat. Thanks, Mom. You both look well too. My father ordered wine without consulting me, a Cabernet he preferred, though he knew I favored whites. It was a small thing, but symbolic of our relationship. My preferences had always been secondary, if considered at all. So, he said after the wine was poured and appetizers ordered, CEO. That's quite a title for someone your age. It's quite a title for anyone, I replied, maintaining eye contact. But yes, I'm proud of the achievement. Pride comes before a fall, Alexandra, my mother said, sipping her wine. We're concerned that you're taking on more than you can handle. CEO carries significant responsibilities. I'm aware of the responsibilities, I said. I've been handling them successfully for over a month now. My father leaned forward. A month is hardly enough time to judge. Leadership isn't just about making easy decisions when things are going well. It's about crisis management, strategic thinking, financial oversight. All of which I've demonstrated, I countered. Our latest product launch exceeded projections by 32%. We've reduced customer churn by 18%. Our employee retention is at an all-time high. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Numbers can be manipulated. The real test comes with time. We're just concerned, my father added, his tone softening slightly. This startup culture encourages rapid advancement without proper foundation. At Mitchell Software, we believe in methodical career development. You build skills over time, prove yourself at each level. Like Jake did? I couldn't help asking. He went straight from college to a senior position. My mother's expression hardened. That's different. Jake has shown natural aptitude since childhood, and he's not claiming to run an entire company. I took a deliberate sip of the wine I didn't particularly enjoy, using the moment to gather my thoughts. Actually, Jake turned down the position at Mitchell Software. He's joining CyberShield next month. The shock on their faces would have been comical under different circumstances. My father recovered first. That's impossible. We've had his office prepared for months. His development track is already mapped out. You should talk to Jake, I suggested. He has his own plans. My mother's face had paled slightly. This is your influence, isn't it? You've been filling his head with ideas about startups and taking unnecessary risks. Jake makes his own decisions, Mom, just like I do. Just like you raised us to do. This last part wasn't entirely true. They had raised Jake to make decisions, me to follow directions. But it felt good to say. Well, my father said after an uncomfortable silence, we can discuss Jake's situation later. We're here to talk about you, Alexandra. Specifically, your future. The way he said future triggered warning bells in my mind. I'd heard that tone before, usually preceding some unwelcome suggestion presented as a foregone conclusion. What about my future? I asked cautiously. My mother and father exchanged a look, that special, practiced look that parents perfect when they're about to present a united front. We've been thinking, my father began, that this CEO position might be a good bargaining chip for you. Bargaining chip? I repeated. For negotiating a senior position at Mitchell Software, my mother clarified. Director of marketing, perhaps. Or head of user experience. Something more suitable. The implication was clear. CEO wasn't suitable for me. Despite all evidence to the contrary, they still saw me as incapable of true leadership. I'm not interested in working at Mitchell Software, I said, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling inside. I'm building something important at Technova, something I believe in. Accessibility software, my father said with slight disdain. It's a niche market, Alexandra. Limited growth potential. It's a market that serves real people with real needs, I replied. And we're expanding beyond accessibility into inclusive design for everyone. Our growth projections are excellent. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand in what she probably thought was a comforting gesture. Darling, we understand you want to prove yourself. And you have. Becoming CEO of a small startup is impressive for someone with your background, but it's time to be practical. Mitchell Software offers stability, family legacy. My background? I pulled my hand away. You mean my computer science degree? My years of development experience? My track record of successful product launches? You know what we mean, my father said. You've always been more creative than technical, more people-oriented than strategic. There's nothing wrong with that, but CEO requires a specific skill set. I looked at them both, these people who had shaped my childhood, whose approval I had sought for so long. And I realized with startling clarity that they would never see me clearly. Their image of me had crystallized years ago. The less capable child, the one who needed guidance and limitations, and no achievement of mine would ever change that perception. I have to go, I said, placing my napkin beside my barely touched plate. There's an issue at work that needs my attention. It was a lie, but a necessary one. If I stayed, I would say things I might regret, not because they weren't true, but because they wouldn't change anything. We've barely started dinner, my mother protested. And we haven't even discussed the Mitchell Software offer properly. There's nothing to discuss, I said, standing. I'm not leaving Technova. I'm not joining Mitchell Software. I'm building my own path, and I'm doing it well. Alexandra, my father's voice had that warning tone he used when Jake or I were being difficult as children. Don't be hasty. Think about your future. I am thinking about my future, I replied. I'm just not thinking about it the way you want me to. I left without waiting for their response, walking quickly through the restaurant and into the cool evening air. Once outside, I took deep breaths, trying to calm the storm of emotions. Anger, disappointment, a lingering sense of inadequacy that I couldn't quite shake despite all my success. My phone buzzed with a text from Priya. Major issue with the Sullivan contract. Team is gathering at the office. Need you ASAP. Real crisis this time, not a convenient excuse. I flagged down a taxi and directed the driver to the Technova office, pushing thoughts of my parents aside. CEO mode activated. The Sullivan contract was our biggest deal to date, a partnership with a major technology company to integrate our accessibility tools into their operating system. It would put our software in the hands of millions of users and establish Technova as a serious player in the industry. But the Sullivan legal team had suddenly raised concerns about our patent portfolio, threatening to pull out if certain conditions weren't met. I spent the next 6 hours in our conference room with our legal counsel, lead developers, and product managers, reviewing patents, drafting responses, and developing contingency plans. By 2 a.m., we had a solid strategy and a revised proposal that addressed Sullivan's concerns while protecting our interests. As the team dispersed, exhausted but relieved, our lead counsel, Marcus, pulled me aside. That was impressive, Alex. Most CEOs I've worked with would have panicked or made concessions we'd regret later. Thanks, I said, gathering my notes. It's my job to stay calm during a crisis. It's more than that, he insisted. You understood both the technical and legal implications instantly. You asked the right questions. You made decisions that balanced risk and opportunity perfectly. His words echoed in my mind as I took a rideshare home in the early morning hours. I had just demonstrated exactly the skills my father claimed I lacked: crisis management, strategic thinking, leadership under pressure. But he would never see it, because it didn't fit his narrative about who I was and what I could achieve. For the first time, I truly accepted that their approval might never come. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need it anymore. The Sullivan crisis marked a turning point for Technova and for me personally. Our revised proposal was accepted, the contract signed, and the partnership announced to industry acclaim. Our stock price jumped, and suddenly investors who had been cautiously interested became actively engaged. We were approached about potential acquisitions, which we declined, and partnership opportunities, which we carefully evaluated. Through it all, I maintained radio silence with my parents. Jake reported that they were still reeling from his decision to join CyberShield instead of the family business. They're in denial, he told me over coffee one Saturday. Dad keeps sending me strategy documents for Mitchell Software as if I'm going to change my mind. How are you handling it? I asked. He shrugged. Better than I expected. There's freedom in disappointing them, you know. Once you've done it, the worst has happened, and you're still standing. I knew exactly what he meant. They had dinner with me a few weeks ago. Tried to convince me to use my CEO position to negotiate a marketing director role at Mitchell Software. Jake nearly choked on his latte. They're unbelievable. After everything you've accomplished, they still don't get it. They never will, I said, surprised by how little pain accompanied the statement. And I'm okay with that now. 6 months into my tenure as CEO, Technova was featured in Forbes as one of the, quote, companies changing how we think about technology. The article highlighted our inclusive design philosophy and innovative approach to software development. There was a full-page photo of me in our office, surrounded by our diverse team, with a pull quote about my vision for technology that worked for everyone, not just the typical user. Priya placed the magazine on my desk the morning it was published. Congratulations, CEO, you've officially made it. I laughed. I think we've all made it. This is a team achievement. True, but they didn't put the team on the cover, she pointed out. They put you. Later that day, as I was preparing for a board meeting, Priya buzzed my office. Your mother is here to see you. No appointment. I froze, mouse hovering over my presentation slides. My mother, here? At Technova? It seemed impossible, worlds colliding in a way I couldn't have imagined. Did she say what she wants? I asked. Just that it's important, and she doesn't mind waiting until you're available. I glanced at the clock. The board meeting was in 30 minutes, and I still needed to review my notes. Tell her I can give her 10 minutes now, or we can schedule something for later this week. A moment later, my mother walked into my office, looking distinctly out of place among the modern furnishings and open-concept design. She was carrying something, the Forbes magazine, I realized with surprise. "Alexandra," she said, taking in the space with a quick, assessing glance. "This is impressive." "Thank you," I replied, remaining seated behind my desk. "I have a board meeting soon, so I'm afraid I only have a few minutes." She nodded, uncharacteristically hesitant. "I saw this," she said, holding up the magazine. "You look very professional." Coming from my mother, this was high praise indeed. I wasn't sure how to respond, so I simply said, "Thank you." She sat in one of the chairs opposite my desk, placing the magazine between us. "Your father and I have been discussing your position here, and Jake's decision as well. I hope you're respecting his choice," I said, a protective edge entering my voice. "We're trying," she admitted. "It's not easy for us to see you both reject the path we laid out. Mitchell's software was supposed to be your legacy. It's your legacy, Mom. Jake and I are creating our own." She was silent for a moment, studying me with an intensity that made me want to fidget like I was 10 years old again. "You've changed," she finally said. "I've grown," I corrected. "There's a difference." "Perhaps." She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "The article mentions your company is developing a platform for educational institutions, making technology more accessible for students with different learning needs." I nodded, surprised she had read it so carefully. "It's one of our major initiatives. The pilot program launches next quarter. Your cousin Rachel's son, you remember Tommy? He has dyslexia. They've been struggling to find appropriate software for his high school classes." This was not the direction I had expected the conversation to take. "We're specifically addressing dyslexia in our educational platform. If Rachel is interested, we could include Tommy in our beta testing group." Something shifted in my mother's expression. Not quite approval, but perhaps reassessment. "I'll tell her. She would appreciate that." The intercom buzzed. Priya's voice announced, "10 minutes until the board meeting, CEO." "I need to prepare," I said, standing. My mother rose as well. "Of course. I won't keep you." She hesitated, then added, "The article quoted you about your vision. Making technology that works for everyone, not just the typical user. It's a worthy goal." I blinked, caught off guard by what sounded suspiciously like genuine admiration. "Thank you." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Your father and we may have been wrong about some things." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a complete acknowledgement of their behavior. But from Victoria Mitchell, it was seismic. "Yes," I said simply. "You were." She nodded once, accepting the response. "Perhaps you could come to dinner sometime, when you're not busy with a crisis or board meeting. Bring Jake if you like." "I'll think about it," I said, neither accepting nor rejecting the olive branch. After she left, I stood motionless in my office, processing what had just happened. Had my mother actually admitted they might have been wrong? Had she actually read the article about Technova, about my work? It wasn't the validation I had once craved, but it was something. An acknowledgement, however small, that I had built something meaningful. The board meeting went exceptionally well. Our quarterly results exceeded projections, the Sullivan partnership was proceeding smoothly, and our educational platform development was on schedule and under budget. The board members were enthusiastic about our direction and supportive of my leadership. "You've transformed this company, Alex," the board chair said as we concluded. "When we appointed you CEO, we knew you had potential, but you've exceeded all expectations." I thought of my mother's visit, of her reluctant admission, Thank you. That means a lot. That evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone rang. It was Jake. Hey, CEO, he greeted me. Did something happen with Mom today? She just called me, asking if we both wanted to come to dinner next week. She sounded different. She came to my office, I told him, still processing the surreal encounter. She saw the Forbes article. And she said they might have been wrong about some things. Jake whistled. Coming from Mom, that's practically falling on her sword and begging forgiveness. I laughed. I know, it was weird. Not quite an apology, but something. Are you going to the dinner? I thought about it as I walked to my car. Maybe. Are you? I think so, he said. Not for them, but for us. We shouldn't have to avoid family gatherings because they can't accept our choices. He had a point. And perhaps there was value in showing them who we had become, not just telling them. Okay, I decided. But if Mom says one word about marketing positions at Mitchell Software, I'm leaving. Jake laughed. Deal. And if Dad starts with his In My Day lectures, I'll create a diversion so you can escape. It felt good to laugh about our parents rather than feel wounded by them. Another sign of growth, perhaps. The following week brought another unexpected visitor to Technova. I was in a meeting with our development team when Priya messaged me, Richard Mitchell is here to see you. My father? First my mother, now him? I excused myself from the meeting and headed to reception, curious and wary in equal measure. He was standing by the wall of accolades we'd accumulated. Awards, press mentions, framed copies of our most significant patents. He turned when he heard me approach. Alexandra, he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of authority that had intimidated me for most of my life. Today, it just sounded like my father's voice. Dad, this is a surprise. He gestured to the display. Impressive collection, particularly the patent for your adaptive interface technology. That's innovative work. Coming from my father, a software veteran with several patents of his own, this was significant praise. Thank you. We have a talented team. Yes, but patents like this, he tapped the frame, they come from leadership, from vision. He cleared his throat. Your mother mentioned she visited last week. I nodded, waiting. She also mentioned your educational platform, the one addressing learning differences. He shifted, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. I've been doing some research. The market for accessible educational technology is larger than I realized. And growing. It's not just about market size, I said. It's about impact. About making education truly accessible to everyone. He nodded slowly. Yes, your mother mentioned that as well. Your philosophy about technology. We stood in awkward silence for a moment before he continued. I came to invite you to Mitchell Software. Not to work, he added quickly, seeing my expression. To speak. We're having an innovation summit next month, and I think our team could benefit from hearing about your approach to inclusive design. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. My father was inviting me to speak at Mitchell Software? As an expert? As someone with valuable insights to share? I understand if you're too busy, he said, misinterpreting my silence. Or if you'd rather not. No, I said quickly. I mean, yes, I'd be interested. I'd need to know more details, of course. He nodded, visibly relieved. I'll have my assistant send over the information. He paused, then added. And perhaps we could discuss a potential collaboration between Technova and Mitchell Software in the accessibility space. A collaboration between my company and theirs? It was so far from anything I could have imagined that I almost laughed. That would be an interesting conversation to have. The Mitchell family dinner was scheduled for Thursday evening at my parents' home. As the day approached, I found myself oscillating between hope and skepticism. Could my parents truly have had a change of heart? Or was this another attempt to bring Jake and me back into the fold on their terms? You're overthinking this, Priya told me when she caught me staring at my calendar instead of preparing for my next meeting. They're just your parents, not a hostile takeover. With my parents, those can be the same thing, I replied, only half joking. Despite my misgivings, I found myself standing on my parents' doorstep Thursday evening, a bottle of wine in one hand and my car keys clutched tightly in the other, an easy escape route if needed. Jake had texted that he was running late but would be there soon. My father opened the door, looking slightly less formal than usual in a button-down shirt without a tie. "Alexandra. Right on time." He accepted the wine with a nod of approval. "A Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. Good choice." The small acknowledgement of my taste, so different from the restaurant where he'd ordered for me without asking, felt significant somehow. My mother was in the kitchen, something that rarely happened when I was growing up. Social events had always been catered, everyday meals prepared by their housekeeper. Yet here she was, wearing an apron and looking slightly flustered. "Alex, you're here," she said, glancing up from what appeared to be a salad in progress. "Dinner is almost ready. I'm trying that roasted salmon recipe from the Times." "You're cooking?" I couldn't hide my surprise. She looked almost embarrassed. "I've been taking classes at that culinary school downtown. It's been educational." My mother, taking cooking classes? The woman who once said that kitchens were where careers go to die? I tried to imagine Victoria Mitchell chopping vegetables alongside other students and failed. "That's great, Mom. Can I help with anything?" Another surprise. She accepted my offer. Soon I was whisking vinaigrette according to her precise instructions while she finished preparing the salmon. It was strangely domestic, this scene that could have been from any normal mother-daughter relationship. Except ours had never been normal. "Your father tells me you've agreed to speak at Mitchell Software's Innovation Summit," she said as she checked the oven. "I'm considering it," I corrected gently. "I'd like to see the agenda first, understand the context." She nodded. Reasonable. The old Alexandra would have agreed immediately, eager to please. The observation was so unexpectedly self-aware that I nearly dropped the whisk. "I suppose she would have." "That's not a criticism," my mother added quickly. "Just an observation. You've become more deliberate. It suits you." Before I could respond to this unprecedented compliment, the doorbell rang, announcing Jake's arrival. Dinner was slightly awkward at first, all of us carefully navigating this new terrain. My father asked about Technova's educational platform, showing genuine interest in the technical challenges. My mother inquired about Jake's new position at CyberShield with minimal judgment in her tone. "So," my father said as we finished the main course, "your mother and I have been doing some thinking. About Mitchell Software. About family legacy." Here it comes, I thought, tensing. The real reason for this dinner. "We've realized that we've been inflexible," he continued. "The company needs new perspectives. Fresh approaches." My mother nodded. "The industry has changed since we founded Mitchell Software. We need to change with it." Jake and I exchanged glances, both clearly wondering where this was heading. "We've decided to create an advisory board," my father announced. "Outside perspectives to help guide the company's future direction. And we'd like both of you to be part of it." I blinked. "An advisory board? Not operational roles," my mother clarified. "We understand you're both committed to your current positions. This would be quarterly meetings, strategic input. Your expertise, but on your terms." It was actually reasonable, not a demand that we abandon our chosen paths, but an invitation to contribute in a way that respected our current commitments. "We'd compensate you appropriately, of course," my father added. "This isn't about family obligation. It's about your professional value." "I'd want to review the structure," Jake said cautiously. "Understand exactly what would be expected." My father nodded. "Of course, we'll have the corporate counsel draft a proper proposal for both of you to review." "And this isn't a backdoor way to eventually pull us into full-time roles?" I asked, still suspicious. My mother's expression softened. "No, Alexandra. We've accepted that you and Jake have chosen different paths. This is about finding a way to maintain family connection through the business, without asking you to sacrifice what you've built elsewhere." It was the most my mother had ever acknowledged my achievements, not explicitly praising them, but implicitly recognizing their value by not expecting me to abandon them. "I'll consider it," I said. once I see the proposal. Same, Jake agreed. My father raised his wine glass. To new arrangements, he said, and to the accomplishments of all the Mitchells, whatever path they choose. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of past wrongs. It wasn't an explicit apology for years of favoritism and dismissal. But it was movement, a shifting of rigid perspectives, a recognition, however oblique, that Jake and I deserved respect for our choices. As I drove home that night, I felt a cautious sense of hope. Not that my parents would suddenly transform into the supportive, affirming figures I had longed for as a child. That fantasy had long since faded. But perhaps we could build something new, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than authority and submission. It wouldn't erase the past, but it might create a better future. The following week brought an unexpected challenge at Technova. Our chief financial officer, David Chen, announced his retirement, effective in 60 days. David had been with the company from the beginning, a steady hand guiding our financial strategy through startup phase to established enterprise. Replacing him would be no small task. We need someone who understands our mission, I told the executive search firm we'd engaged. Not just someone who can read a balance sheet. Technova isn't just about profit margins. While maintaining healthy profit margins, of course, David added with a smile. The search process was intensive. I interviewed countless candidates, each impressive in their own way, but none who seemed to fully grasp what made Technova special. They understood the numbers, but not the purpose behind them. What about internal promotion? Nadia suggested during one of our regular mentoring sessions. Someone who already understands the company culture? It was a good suggestion, but our finance team was still relatively small. The most senior person after David was our controller, Rachel Lai. Brilliant with numbers, but with limited strategic experience. She's not ready for CFO, David said when I mentioned the possibility. But she could be, with the right mentorship. An idea began to form. What if we brought in an interim CFO? Someone experienced who could mentor Rachel while she grows into the role. David considered this. It could work. But finding the right interim, someone willing to eventually work themselves out of a job, that's tricky. I spent the weekend mulling over the problem, making lists of potential candidates, considering different structures for the finance department. On Sunday evening, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Alexandra Mitchell? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes, this is Alex. This is Margaret Winters. We met briefly at the Women in Tech luncheon last month. I remembered her, former CFO of a major tech company, now semi-retired and serving on several boards. We'd chatted about the challenges of accessible design from a budget perspective. Of course, Margaret, how are you? Well, thank you. I hope you don't mind the call on a Sunday. But I heard through the grapevine that you're looking for a new CFO. News traveled fast in Seattle's tech community. Yes, our current CFO is retiring. We're in the middle of a search. I might have a proposition for you, she said. I'm not looking for a full-time executive role again. I'm enjoying my board work and part-time consulting. But I've been following Technova's work and I'm impressed. I'd be interested in discussing an interim arrangement while you develop internal talent. It was as if she had read my mind. That's exactly what I've been considering, I admitted. We have a controller with tremendous potential who could benefit from mentorship. Perfect. Why don't we meet this week to discuss possibilities? No commitment on either side, just exploration. By the time David's retirement date arrived, we had a succession plan in place. Margaret would join as interim CFO for 1 year, with Rachel as deputy CFO being groomed to take over the position. The board approved the arrangement enthusiastically. But CyberShield is working out really well. I'm leading the enterprise security team now, and we just landed a major government contract. I'm secure enough in my own path that I don't need Dad's approval anymore. Look at us, I mused, all grown up and psychologically healthy. Well, let's not go crazy, he laughed. We're works in progress, but better than we were. The Mitchell Software headquarters was exactly as I remembered, a gleaming tower of glass and steel in downtown Seattle, the company logo prominently displayed in the lobby. As I checked in at reception, I felt a strange sense of disconnect. I had once imagined working here, in some vague supporting role that never quite materialized in my parents' descriptions. Now I was here as an invited speaker, an expert, a CEO in my own right. My father met me in the lobby, looking unusually nervous. "Alexandra, thank you for coming. We have a full house for your session. It's one of the most anticipated of the summit." "No pressure," I said dryly. He actually smiled. "You'll be fine. Your mother is already in the auditorium, saving seats in the front row." The Mitchell Software Auditorium was filled to capacity. Employees and invited guests from across the industry gathered for the Innovation Summit. My session was scheduled just before lunch, prime time and conference scheduling. As I waited backstage, I reviewed my presentation one last time. I had decided to focus on the business case for inclusive design, showing how accessibility features often improved usability for all users, not just those with specific needs. It was a perspective that combined social impact with commercial value, a bridge between my parents' business-focused worldview and my mission-driven approach. 5 minutes, Ms. Mitchell, the event coordinator told me. I took a deep breath, straightening my jacket and checking my appearance one last time. The outfit had been carefully chosen, professional but distinctly my style, not what my mother would have selected, another small declaration of independence. My father's introduction was surprisingly warm. Our next speaker brings a unique perspective on inclusive design and its implications for the future of software development. As CEO of Technova, she has pioneered approaches that expand technology access to underserved users while creating superior experiences for everyone. Please welcome Alexandra Mitchell. The applause was polite but enthusiastic as I took the stage. I spotted my parents in the front row, my mother sitting uncharacteristically straight, as if tensed for what was to come. Jake was beside them, giving me a subtle thumbs up. "Thank you for that introduction," I began. "It's a unique experience, speaking at Mitchell Software. Many of you know that Richard and Victoria Mitchell are my parents, and that I chose a different path than the family business. What you might not know is that this decision wasn't always supported. I saw my mother shift uncomfortably in her seat. This wasn't what she had expected. At my brother's college graduation, I overheard my mother say something that stayed with me. Alex will never amount to anything in tech. It was a painful moment, but also a clarifying one. Sometimes the doubts of others can become our greatest motivation. My mother's expression was unreadable now, but my father placed his hand over hers, a gesture of support I had rarely seen between them. I'm not sharing this to embarrass anyone or to claim some moral victory. I'm sharing it because it illustrates a fundamental truth about innovation. It often comes from unexpected places, from people who don't fit conventional molds, who bring different perspectives precisely because they've walked different paths. From there, I moved into the substance of my presentation, the principles of inclusive design, the market opportunity it represented, the technical and creative challenges it posed. I shared case studies from Technova, demonstrating how features originally designed for users with specific needs had improved experiences for everyone. Inclusive design isn't charity, I concluded. It's innovation. It's seeing the world as it actually is, diverse, complex, full of different bodies and minds and ways of experiencing technology. When we design for that reality instead of some imagined typical user, we create better products for everyone. And isn't that the ultimate goal of any technology company worth its salt? The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. As I fielded questions from the audience, I was struck by the engagement level. These were people genuinely interested in the concepts, seeing the potential for their own work. After the session, as attendees filed out for lunch, my parents approached the stage. My mother's expression was complicated, pride mixed with something like regret. "That was excellent, Alexandra," my father said. "Several of our department heads have already mentioned potential applications for our product lines." "Thank you," I said, packing up my presentation materials. "I hope it was useful." "It was more than useful," my mother said quietly. "It was illuminating." I looked at her, waiting. "I owe you an apology," she continued, her voice barely audible above the ambient noise of the emptying auditorium. What you overheard at Jake's graduation, it was cruel, and more importantly, it was wrong. I was speaking from fear, not insight. It was perhaps the most honest thing my mother had ever said to me. Fear of what? That you would fail. That you would be hurt by an industry that can be brutal. That you would blame us for not protecting you. She shook her head. But that was never my decision to make. It was yours. And you made it well. Better than well, my father added. The work you're doing at Technova is remarkable, Alexandra. Genuinely innovative. We should have seen your potential sooner. The acknowledgement I had once craved so desperately now felt nice, but not necessary. I had built my confidence on my own achievements, not their approval. Still, there was healing in this moment. Thank you for saying that, I said simply. It means something to hear it. Your presentation mentioned a potential collaboration between companies in the accessibility space, my father said, shifting to more comfortable territory. Perhaps we could discuss that more concretely, now that you and Jake have agreed to join the advisory board. I'd be open to that discussion, I agreed. Technova has some capabilities that might complement Mitchell Software's products. As we headed to lunch, I caught Jake's eye across the room. He gave me a questioning look, and I nodded slightly. All good. We had come a long way from the siblings who had once competed for parental approval, him automatically receiving it while I struggled for scraps. Now we were allies, supporting each other's independent paths while finding a new way to engage with the family legacy. The rest of the summit passed in a blur of presentations, networking, and discussions about potential collaborations. By the end of the day, I had compiled a list of follow-up meetings with Mitchell Software executives interested in Technova's accessibility expertise. As I prepared to leave, my mother approached me one last time. Alexandra, before you go, I wanted to give you something. She handed me a small box, elegantly wrapped. Open it later, when you have a moment. Curious, I tucked it into my bag. Thank you for today, I said, for the invitation and for everything else. She nodded, understanding the reference to her apology. Thank you for accepting both the invitation and the apology. Later that evening, in the quiet of my apartment, I opened the box my mother had given me. Inside was a vintage brooch, a small golden owl with tiny diamond eyes. I recognized it immediately as one my grandmother had often worn, a piece I had admired as a child. There was a note in my mother's precise handwriting. For wisdom and vision. Qualities you have demonstrated in abundance. With pride, Mom. It wasn't effusive by most standards. My mother would never be the type for emotional declarations. But from Victoria Mitchell, this was equivalent to a dramatic display of affection. And the gift itself, a family heirloom I had admired, rather than something she thought I should want, showed a new level of seeing me as I actually was. I pinned the brooch to my lapel the next morning before heading to the office. It felt like carrying a small piece of reconciliation with me. Not perfect or complete, but genuine in its way. When I arrived at Technova, Priya was waiting with my usual coffee and a stack of messages. How was the summit? She asked. Awkward family dynamics or productive industry event? Surprisingly both, I replied, in a good way. Well, while you were making peace with your past, the future called. She handed me a message slip. The education department at Stanford wants to discuss a potential partnership for their special education program. They're specifically interested in our adaptive learning interfaces. I smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought me here, from the doubted daughter to a CEO whose work was being recognized by major institutions. Set up the call. I think we have a lot to offer them. As I settled at my desk to review the day's agenda, I caught sight of the nameplate Jake had given me months ago. Alexandra Mitchell, CEO. A title earned through perseverance, vision, and the courage to defy expectations. Not bad for someone who would never amount to anything. 1 year into my role as CEO, Technova reached a significant milestone. Our adaptive educational platform was being implemented in school districts across 3 states, with a pilot program launching at Stanford School of Education. What had begun as a niche accessibility product had evolved into a comprehensive learning system that benefited students of all abilities. To celebrate this achievement and mark my first anniversary as CEO, the Technova team organized a surprise gathering in our office. I walked into what I thought was a routine all-hands meeting to find the space decorated with balloons and a banner reading, "1 year of visionary leadership." "Speech!" someone called out as I stood there, momentarily speechless. Public speaking had become second nature to me over the past year. Investor presentations, industry conferences, customer meetings. But this moment felt different, more personal, more significant. A year ago, I began looking out at the faces of my team. I was terrified. I didn't tell anyone, but that first day as CEO, I was convinced I was going to fail spectacularly. A murmur of surprised laughter rippled through the crowd. It's true. I'd spent so many years being told what I couldn't do that I had internalized those limitations. Even as I was accepting this role, there was a voice in my head, sounding suspiciously like my mother, saying, "You're not qualified for this." I paused, remembering those early days of doubt. But here's what I learned over this past year. That voice was wrong, not just about me, but about all of us. We are all capable of so much more than the boxes others try to put us in. I gestured to the products displayed around our office, the educational platform, the adaptive interfaces, the tools that were changing how people interacted with technology. Look at what we've built together. Technology that doesn't just serve the so-called average user, but recognizes and celebrates human diversity. We did that not by following conventional wisdom about what software should be, but by challenging those assumptions at every turn. The room was quiet now, everyone listening intently. That's the real lesson of this past year for me. Success doesn't come from meeting others' expectations. It comes from having the courage to define success on your own terms. From building something that reflects your values, not someone else's. Priya stepped forward, holding a small gift box. "From all of us," she said, "to commemorate your first year." Inside was a beautiful glass award, etched with the Technova logo and the words, "For leadership that makes technology more human." I felt a lump in my throat as I read the inscription. "Thank you all," I said, my voice slightly unsteady. "This means more than you know." Later that afternoon, as the celebration wound down and people returned to their work, I sat in my office reflecting on the journey of the past year. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "Happy CEO-versary. Dinner tonight to celebrate? My treat." I smiled and texted back my acceptance. Jake had become my strongest ally over the past year. Our childhood competition transformed into mutual support as we navigated our respective careers. We met at a new restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay, the Seattle skyline glittering against the darkening sky. Jake was already waiting when I arrived, a gift bag beside him on the table. "Not you too," I laughed as I sat down. "I've already received more gifts today than on my birthday." "This one's special," he insisted, pushing the bag toward me. "Open it." Inside was a framed photograph I hadn't seen in years. Jake and me as children, maybe 7 and 5 years old, sitting at our father's desk, pretending to work on his computer. We were both laughing, clearly delighted with our game of make-believe. "Where did you find this?" I asked, touching the image gently. "Mom had it in an old album. I asked her for a copy." He smiled. "Look at us, co-CEOs from the beginning." I studied our younger selves, struck by how unburdened we looked. This was before the weight of parental expectations had fully settled on us, before I had learned to doubt myself. "We were so sure we could do anything," I murmured. "And we were right," Jake said firmly. "Just took us a while to remember that." We ordered dinner and wine, catching up on our respective work challenges. Jake had recently been promoted to Chief Security Officer at CyberShield, a role that placed him on the executive leadership team. "The advisory board at Mitchell Software is working out better than I expected," he commented as we finished our entrees. "Dad actually implemented some of my security recommendations last month." "I know," I agreed. "And they're seriously considering integrating our accessibility features into their next software release. It's a significant contract for Technova." "Who would have thought a year ago that we'd be having this conversation?" Jake mused. "Both of us in leadership roles, both successful on our own terms, and actually collaborating with the family business instead of being consumed by it." "Not me," I admitted. A year ago, I was still avoiding Mom's calls and dreading family events. Speaking of Mom, Jake said, setting down his wine glass. She asked me something interesting yesterday. She wanted to know if you'd consider being interviewed for that the Seattle Business Journal is doing. I nearly choked on my wine. Mom suggested that? The same woman who once told me technology wasn't my strong suit? Jake grinned. The very same. Apparently she's been following your press coverage and thinks your story would be, inspirational for young women considering careers in technology. He mimicked our mother's precise diction perfectly. That's unexpected. People can change, Alex. Even our parents. He hesitated, then added, She's proud of you, you know. In her own complicated way. I thought about the owl brooch, which I had worn to several important meetings over the past few months. A small acknowledgement, but meaningful. I'll think about the interview, I said. It might be good visibility for Technova. And good for all those girls out there being told what they can't do. Jake added softly. He had a point. If my story could help even one young woman resist the limitations others tried to place on her, wasn't that worth sharing? The next morning, I contacted the Seattle Business Journal and agreed to the interview. It was scheduled for the following week, a photographer to accompany the journalist for a portrait to run alongside the article. The interview itself was comprehensive, covering my education, early career, the transition to CEO, and my vision for Technova's future. The journalist, a sharp-eyed woman named Rebecca Chen, had clearly done her research. There's been some buzz about a potential collaboration between Technova and Mitchell Software, she noted toward the end of our conversation. That's your parents' company, correct? Did your family connection facilitate that partnership? It was a fair question, though more direct than I had anticipated. Mitchell Software and Technova are exploring a strategic collaboration based on complementary technologies, I answered carefully. The initiative came through proper business channels, evaluated on its merits. Rebecca looked up from her notes. But surely your relationship with the founders played some role? I considered the question, wanting to be honest without feeding into any narrative that minimized Technova's achievements or suggested nepotism. My parents and I have had a complicated relationship when it comes to my career in technology, I said finally. For many years, they didn't believe this was the right path for me. Our current professional relationship has developed despite that history, not because of it. She looked intrigued. Would you elaborate on that? I hadn't planned to discuss my personal history so explicitly, but something about her direct approach made me reconsider. Maybe this was part of the story that needed telling, not just the success, but the obstacles overcome to achieve it. At my brother's college graduation, I said, the words coming more easily than I expected, I overheard my mother say that I would never amount to anything in technology. 3 years later, I was appointed CEO of Technova. That journey, from being dismissed to leading a company that's changing how people interact with technology, taught me something important about perseverance and defining success on your own terms. Rebecca was typing rapidly now, clearly recognizing the heart of the story. And how does your mother feel about your success now? I smiled, thinking of the gradual, subtle shift in our relationship. She's come around. We both have. Family dynamics are rarely simple, but we've found a new way of relating to each other. With mutual respect, if not always perfect understanding. When the article was published 2 weeks later, that quote was prominently featured. The headline read, Redefining Success, How Technova CEO Alexandra Mitchell is Making Technology More Human. The accompanying portrait showed me in my office, the Seattle skyline visible through the window behind me, the owl brooch visible on my lapel. I looked confident, capable, every inch the CEO I had become. My phone began buzzing with messages shortly after the article went live online. Colleagues, industry contacts, old classmates, all reaching out with congratulations and praise for the piece. But the message I was most curious about, the one I both anticipated and dreaded, didn't come until evening. Alexandra, my mother's text read, the article is quite good. You spoke candidly about our past difficulties, but fairly. I appreciate that. The photograph captures your confidence beautifully. The brooch was a good choice. It wasn't effusive, but from Victoria Mitchell, It was the equivalent of enthusiastic praise. And the acknowledgement of our past difficulties was itself significant, a recognition that her words and actions had caused real harm, even if she couldn't quite bring herself to apologize directly. I typed a simple response. "Thank you, Mom, that means a lot." The article generated unexpected momentum for Technova. Inquiries about our educational platform increased, and several major technology publications requested follow-up interviews. The story of a woman succeeding despite being told she would never amount to anything seemed to resonate with many readers. One morning about a month after the article was published, Priya buzzed my office. "There's a young woman here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's very persistent. Says her name is Zoe Rodriguez." I checked my calendar. The morning was packed with meetings. "What's it regarding?" "She says she read your interview and wants to talk to you about careers in technology. She's a high school student." I hesitated. My schedule was already tight, but something about the request tugged at me. Hadn't I just been thinking about helping girls resist the limitations others placed on them? "Tell her I can give her 15 minutes before my next meeting." Zoe Rodriguez turned out to be a poised 17-year-old with bright eyes and a determined expression. She carried a worn laptop covered in stickers promoting various coding languages and tech events. "Thank you for seeing me, Ms. Mitchell," she said, taking the seat I offered. "I know you're busy." "Call me Alex," I said, struck by her composure. "Priya mentioned you read the Business Journal article?" She nodded. "My computer science teacher shared it with our class. Your story? It really hit home for me." "How so?" Zoe opened her laptop, showing me a series of coding projects she had developed. A simple app to help her younger brother, who had dyslexia, practice reading, a website for her mother's small catering business, a game she was developing with friends. "I love building things," she explained, her eyes lighting up as she showed me her work. "Solving problems with code, but my guidance counselor says I should focus on something more suitable for someone like me, maybe nursing or teaching." "Someone like you?" I echoed, a familiar anger stirring. "A girl from the South End. First-generation college-bound. You know." She shrugged, but I could see the hurt beneath her casual demeanor. I did know. Different circumstances, but the same fundamental message. This isn't for you. Aim lower. Stay in your lane. "What do you want to study?" I asked. "Computer science. I want to build accessibility tools, actually. Like Technova does." She hesitated, then added, "That's why your article meant so much. You didn't listen when people told you that you couldn't do it." I studied her face, seeing the same determination I had felt at her age, but also the vulnerability, the fear that maybe the doubters were right. "Zoe, look at this," I said, turning my monitor so she could see what I had been working on before she arrived. The code for our latest accessibility feature. This is what I was doing before I became CEO. I still review code regularly, contribute to our core features, because I love building things too. Her eyes widened as she scanned the code. "This is for your voice recognition system?" I nodded, impressed by how quickly she had grasped the purpose. "For users with mobility limitations. But your guidance counselor would probably say it's not suitable for someone like me either." She smiled at that, getting the point. "Here's what I've learned," I continued. "People who tell you what you can't do are usually protecting something. Their own worldview, their own sense of what's possible, their own power. But they don't get to define your capabilities or your future. Only you can do that." Zoe nodded, absorbing this. "So you're saying I should ignore my guidance counselor? I'm saying you should listen to yourself first. You know what you love, what you're good at. That internal compass is more reliable than anyone else's opinion of what's suitable for you." Our 15 minutes extended to 20 as I looked through more of her projects, genuinely impressed by her skills and creativity. Before she left, I gave her my email address and offered to connect her with our university recruitment team for information about internships when she was ready. "Thank you," she said at the door, clutching her laptop. "Not just for the time, but for showing that it's possible to be someone like me in technology." After she left, I sat reflecting on our conversation. How many Zoes were out there, bright and capable, but being steered away from their passions because someone decided tech wasn't suitable for them. How many potential innovations were lost because talent was channeled based on stereotypes rather than abilities? The thought stayed with me through my next meetings, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind. By the end of the day, it had crystallized into the beginning of an idea, something that could extend Technova's mission beyond our products. I scheduled a meeting with our marketing and community outreach teams for the following morning. I want to discuss a new initiative, I told them. Something focused on expanding access to technology careers. The Technova Pathways program launched 6 months later, a comprehensive initiative that included scholarships for underrepresented students pursuing technology degrees, mentorship programs, connecting industry professionals with young people interested in tech careers, and a series of workshops for educators on recognizing and nurturing technical talent in all students. Zoe Rodriguez became one of our first scholarship recipients, her acceptance to the University of Washington's computer science program coinciding perfectly with the program's launch. She would receive not only financial support but mentorship throughout her college years and guaranteed internship opportunities. The program generated significant positive press for Technova, but that had never been the primary goal. This was about creating systemic change, about ensuring that talent wasn't wasted because it didn't fit someone's preconception of what a tech person looked like. At the formal launch event held at a local high school, I found myself standing beside my mother, who had unexpectedly accepted my invitation to attend. "This is quite impressive, Alexandra," she said, watching as students excitedly explored the coding workshops we had set up. "Very purposeful." "That's a good word for it," I agreed. "It has a clear purpose, making sure other kids don't hear the same discouraging messages I did." She winced slightly but didn't deny the reference. "Yes, well, some of us learn wisdom too late to avoid causing harm." She turned to face me directly. "But perhaps not too late to support making amends." Before I could ask what she meant, she continued, "Your father and I would like to make a personal donation to the scholarship fund. A significant one. If that would be welcome." I stared at her, momentarily speechless. "Of course it would be welcome, but why?" "Because it's important work," she said simply. "And because we were wrong, Alexandra. About you. About what you could achieve. If our support can help ensure other young people don't face the same limitations we tried to place on you, then perhaps some good can come from our mistakes." It was the most direct acknowledgement she had ever made of the harm their attitudes had caused. Not quite an apology, but a recognition and a desire to help repair the damage, not just to me, but to others who might face similar barriers. "Thank you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "That would mean a great deal." She nodded, a hint of emotion in her eyes before she quickly composed herself. "Your father wanted to be here today, but the Mitchell Software Board meeting couldn't be rescheduled. He sends his regards and his pride." As she moved away to examine one of the student projects, I felt a complex mix of emotions: gratitude for this unexpected support, a lingering sadness for the years of discouragement, but predominantly a sense of something like closure. Not perfect healing, that might never come fully, but a closing of one chapter and the opening of another. Jake found me a few minutes later, grinning as he approached. "Did Mom really just offer a donation? Voluntarily? Without being guilted into it?" I laughed. "Apparently. She called it making amends." "Wow. Character development I didn't see coming." He shook his head in amazement. "But speaking of development, have you seen what some of these kids are building? There's a girl over there who's created an app that translates text to simplified language for people with cognitive disabilities. She's 16. Zoe Rodriguez," I said. "One of our first scholarship recipients. She's brilliant. I just talked to her about potential cybersecurity applications for her translation algorithm. You should hire her before someone else does." "That's the plan. After she finishes college." We watched as Zoe demonstrated her app to a group of younger students, her hands moving animatedly as she explained the code, her face alight with the joy of creation and sharing knowledge. "You know what I love about this?" Jake said quietly. "It's not just about individual success. It's about changing the whole system. Making sure talent doesn't get wasted because it doesn't fit someone's narrow definition of who belongs in tech. Exactly. I smiled at my brother, grateful for his understanding. Individual success is great, but lasting change happens when we transform the environments that shape people's possibilities. The launch event extended well past its scheduled end time, students and parents reluctant to leave the workshops and demonstrations. As things finally wound down, Priya approached with a message. "Your assistant from Technova just called," she said. "The governor's office is on the line. They want to discuss making the Pathways program a statewide initiative, with potential funding from the state education budget." As I headed back to the office to take the call, I passed a wall where students had been invited to complete the sentence. "Technology is for people who..." The responses, written in colorful markers, filled the entire space. "Are creative, want to solve problems, care about making life better, think differently, are determined, dream big. Not a single limitation, not for people like me, just possibility, open to anyone willing to reach for it." Back at Technova, I settled at my desk to take the governor's call. On my desk sat the nameplate Jake had given me, Alexandra Mitchell, CEO. And beside it, a new addition, a framed quote I had installed after my conversation with Zoe. It read simply, "Never let someone else's limited imagination define what you can achieve." As I picked up the phone, I glanced at the Seattle skyline visible through my office window, the same view captured in that business journal photograph. But now I saw it differently. Not just as a backdrop for my own journey, but as a landscape of possibility for all the Zoes out there, waiting for someone to tell them yes instead of no, can instead of can't. "This is Alex Mitchell," I said into the phone, my voice confident, my vision clear. 3 years after hearing those crushing words at my brother's graduation, I wasn't just proving my mother wrong about me. I was helping ensure that no one else would have to overcome the same barriers to become who they were meant to be. And perhaps that was the most powerful response to, "You'll never amount to anything." Not just personal success, but creating a world where such limiting pronouncements lost their power entirely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.